It was a cold evening in early December of 2008, and the city of Allentown, Pennsylvania, was already wrapped in a blanket of snow. Christmas lights flickered along the streets, and the wind carried that sharp chill only locals really understood. Inside the Blue Rose Grill, the atmosphere was warmer. Soft music, candles on every table, laughter echoing off the walls. It was supposed to be a celebration. At least that's what Hannah thought. She had spent over 2 hours getting ready. Her dress was navy blue, flowy enough to hide what she wanted hidden. At over 320 pounds, Hannah had learned how to blend into the background, even in a room full of people. But tonight, she hoped, just a little, that her husband would look at her the way he used to. Maybe say she looked nice. Maybe just hold her hand. He didn't. Brad was already 3 drinks in when she arrived, sitting at the center table with his co-workers from the insurance firm. He barely glanced at her when she walked in. "You're late," he muttered, without standing up. She smiled nervously and sat beside him. The table was filled with sharp suits, expensive watches, and polished smiles. People who lived for wealth and status. Hannah felt the weight of her body even heavier among them. The waitress came. Brad ordered steak. He didn't ask Hannah what she wanted. "She'll have the salad," he said, laughing. "Clearly she needs it." There was a pause, a long, heavy pause. Then, laughter. But not from Hannah, from his co-workers, from their wives, from everyone. Her throat tightened. Her hands shook. She looked around, praying someone would say something, anything. But all she saw was amusement. She wanted the floor to open and swallow her whole. And then Brad raised his glass. "To prosperity and progress," he said, "and to wives who try. Bless their hearts." That was the moment. It wasn't the first time Brad had humiliated her, but something about doing it there, in public, in front of people who mattered to him, made it different. This wasn't just cruelty. It was a performance. A show where her body, her pain, her shame were the punchline. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. Hannah barely touched her salad. She kept her eyes on the table, her mind screaming inside. That word, prosperity, echoed in her head like a cruel joke. How could a man speak of values, wealth, and success while tearing down the person who shared his home? Back in the car, silence filled the space between them. Snow hit the windshield like soft bullets. Hannah stared out, thinking about all the years she had given him, all the times she had chosen to believe love meant enduring pain. That being a good wife meant shrinking, her voice, her needs, her dreams. That night, in the quiet of their bedroom, something inside her cracked. Not a loud break, more like the sound of a lock turning. She stood in front of the mirror, studying, the reflection she had avoided for so long, the round face, the tired eyes, the body shaped by years of stress, emotional eating, and silent tears. But also, the woman inside. The one no one saw, the one who deserved more. She whispered to her own reflection, "No more. Not for him, not for revenge, but for her health, her self-worth, her values, for the life she still had time to live. A life filled with real prosperity, not just money in a man's pocket. A life where wealth meant peace, confidence, and freedom." And on that cold December night, Hannah made a decision that would change everything. She was going to lose the weight. Yes, but more than that, she was going to shed the silence, the shame, and the lie that she wasn't enough. It was the end of who she had been, and the beginning of the woman she was about to become. It was the morning after the dinner. The snow was still falling lightly over Allentown, coating the sidewalks in silence. Hannah stood in the kitchen, holding a warm mug of coffee between both hands. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but she had barely slept anyway. The words Brad said the night before still echoed in her mind like a cruel melody. She hadn't spoken to him since they got home. He'd gone to bed drunk, still chuckling to himself. She'd stayed on the couch all night, eyes wide open, heart wide awake. By 6:30 that morning, she was already on her laptop. Not scrolling social media like usual, not shopping for other people's lives. No. This time she typed, "How to start over when you feel worthless." That one search opened a door. Not a magic solution, just a start. She wrote in a notebook. Day 1. I am 322 pounds. I don't know what I'm doing, but I want my life back. I want health. I want peace. I want freedom. That was the first thing she claimed for herself in years. She didn't tell anyone. Not Brad. Not her mother, who always said, "Just be grateful you have a husband." Not her sister, who lived out in Pittsburgh with her perfect house and gym membership and birthday parties that made Hannah feel like a joke. Instead, Hannah kept quiet. She downloaded a walking app, dug out her old sneakers from the back of the closet. They didn't fit right anymore, but she tied them anyway. That first walk lasted 7 minutes, just 7, around the block. And it hurt. Her legs ached, her breath came short, and halfway through her face turned red from the cold and from shame. But she didn't stop. She whispered to herself, "This is about me now. Not him, not anyone else." For the first time in years, she made breakfast for herself, not just for Brad. Eggs, a slice of toast, some fruit. She looked at the plate and thought, this feels like respect. Brad came downstairs around 8, yawning, rubbing his face. "You're up early," he said, grabbing the remote. "Yeah," she replied, not looking at him. He noticed the plate. "You cooking for yourself now?" he asked, half laughing. "What's next? Yoga videos and green juice." Hannah stayed quiet. That morning, something shifted. Not just in how she ate or walked, but in how she carried herself. Something small but steady, like a seed that had no idea it would someday become a tree. Over the next week, Hannah kept walking. 10 minutes, then 15. She started writing down everything she ate, not out of obsession, but out of honesty. She wasn't chasing a number. She was chasing her values, discipline, peace, self-respect, health, prosperity. Not the kind Brad talked about with his banker friends. Real prosperity. Waking up and not hating herself. Feeling her heartbeat and knowing it meant something. By the end of the month, she had lost 7 pounds. It wasn't about the number. But it reminded her that change was possible. That her story didn't have to end with shame. One evening, while folding laundry, she found a pay stub from Brad's firm. She wasn't snooping. It had just fallen out of his pants. She stared at the number. 6 figures. Bonuses. Perks. Company car. All this time he had made her feel like she was the burden, like she was the one holding them back from wealth, success, status. But here it was in black and white. He had the money, and still no happiness. She folded the stub in half and put it aside. Brad walked in. "You folding my clothes now?" he asked, sarcastic. "No," she said calmly. "I'm folding mine." He laughed. "Well, don't let this little health kick get to your head. People like you don't change." Hannah didn't respond. She didn't need to, because by then she already had. And deep down, he was starting to feel it. By mid-February of 2009, the snow in Allentown had started to melt, leaving behind patches of wet pavement and the first signs of spring. Hannah was walking farther now, almost a mile every morning. Her body still hurt sometimes, but her breath was steadier. Her joints ached less. Her eyes looked brighter in the mirror. She had lost 23 pounds. The change wasn't just physical. Something deeper was taking root. She was sleeping better. She laughed out loud once while watching an old movie and surprised herself. It had been years since she laughed without watching someone's reaction. Brad noticed. Not in a kind way, in a confused way. "You've been acting different lately," he said one night, squinting at her from the couch. "I've been living different," Hannah replied, folding laundry without looking up. He chuckled, but there was an edge to it. "You think some walks and salad are going to turn you into a model?" "No," she said simply, "but they're helping me remember who I am." Brad didn't respond. For the first time in a long time, silence worked in her favor. At church that Sunday, a woman named Denise approached her after service. She was older, but graceful. She smiled and said, "Hannah, you've got a light coming back in your face. Keep going, sweetheart." That moment stayed with her. Not because of the compliment, but because it reminded her that real wealth, the kind that matters, comes from being seen, respected, and valued. Denise didn't know about the late nights or the pain, but she saw something was changing. That meant something. Brad, however, was changing in a different way. He was coming home later. Snapping more. He started making little comments about the groceries she bought, like, "Organic now. Must be nice to waste money." Or, "You really think all this healthy stuff is going to fix what's wrong?" Hannah didn't argue anymore. She didn't need to. The old her would have cried, apologized, tried to explain herself. The new her had no interest in begging for basic respect. Her notebook, now filled with entries, had become a mirror for her soul. On March 4th, she wrote, "I lost another 10 pounds this month. But more than that, I didn't break when Brad mocked me. That's the real win. I'm learning that health isn't just what you eat, it's what you tolerate. And I'm done tolerating people who mistake cruelty for strength." On March 21st, she joined a women's fitness group at the YMCA. She was terrified to walk into that room. But the minute she did, something in her heart cracked open again. There were women in all shapes and sizes. No mirrors, no judgment, just effort, sweat, encouragement. For the first time in years, Hannah felt like she belonged somewhere. At the end of the first session, a trainer named Carla pulled her aside and said, "You've got grit, girl. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." That night, Brad was already home, beer in hand, eyes on the TV. "Where you been?" he asked. "Gym," she answered, tossing her bag onto the chair. He scoffed. "Trying to be one of those fit moms now? Hate to break it to you, but no one's hiring models in their 30s. Hannah turned, calm. "I'm not looking for a job. I'm building a life." He blinked. She didn't flinch. And that was when it hit him. She wasn't scared of him anymore. For Brad, control was wealth. Power, having the final word. But now Hannah was richer in ways he couldn't touch. Her values had shifted. Her health was improving. Her circle was growing. And that terrified him. Because deep down, Brad was starting to understand something he never expected. Hannah's prosperity wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual, real. And that kind of prosperity? You can't buy with money. By early May of 2009, the air in Allentown had changed. Spring was in full bloom, and so was Hannah. She had now lost over 50 pounds. Her clothes fit differently. Her walk had a new rhythm. Her voice held more power. But what truly shifted was invisible. Her spirit. Every morning she stood in front of the mirror not to criticize, but to recognize. Her body was still large, but it was strong now, capable, in motion. Every pound she dropped felt like a layer of pain left behind. Every pound lost wasn't just weight. It was a story she no longer had to carry. She'd started journaling more seriously. Not just food or workouts, but thoughts, questions, realizations. One entry read, I used to think money was the answer. If I was rich, I could buy peace. If I looked better, I'd earn love. But real wealth is living in truth. And my truth is, I'm finally choosing myself. Brad, meanwhile, was unraveling. At work, whispers had begun. Something about a complaint from HR, some shady numbers in a client file. He was under pressure, and he didn't hide it well. He drank more, slammed doors, snapped at little things. But Hannah didn't flinch. One night, he walked in angry. "You've been telling people our business?" he barked. "What are you talking about?" she asked calmly. "I don't know, Hannah. You've been acting brand new, hanging out with those yoga ladies, thinking you're better than everyone now. Maybe someone's trying to take me down, and it sure as hell feels like it started when you found your power." She looked him in the eye. "Maybe your downfall isn't about me. Maybe it's just the consequences finally catching up." His face tightened. He had nothing to say. And for once, she didn't try to fix it. 2 days later, Hannah got invited to speak at her women's group. Just 10 minutes. Share her story. Carla, the trainer, said, "Your words carry weight, Hannah. Not just pain, truth. That's powerful." That night, she stood in front of 12 women in a circle and said, "My name's Hannah. I've lived in Allentown my whole life. I spent years thinking my worth came from being small enough to please other people. But now I know. My worth is in my values, my health, my peace, my ability to choose a different life, even when it's hard." Afterward, one woman came up in tears. "You just said everything I feel but never had the courage to say." Hannah smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes. She wasn't just transforming her body, she was touching lives. And that was the kind of prosperity no paycheck could ever match. Meanwhile, Brad's work situation worsened. On May 26th, he came home with a pale face. "I might be suspended," he muttered. Hannah sat quietly at the kitchen table, sipping tea. "What happened?" she asked. "Someone dug through old numbers, said I inflated reports. HR's involved now. If this goes to the partners, I could lose everything." He looked at her then, a shadow of the man who once laughed while tearing her down. "I need your help," he said. "They know we're married. If you could just talk to someone. Say this is all a misunderstanding. It could help me." She stared at him, stunned by the audacity. "You humiliated me in front of those same people," she said slowly. "You made me feel like nothing. And now you want me to save your job?" "It's not just my job," he whispered. "It's our life, our money, everything we've built." Hannah's face didn't move. Her heart didn't race. She had clarity now. "You built a life on lies, Brad, and you spent our money on image, not integrity. You cared about wealth, but never about values. Now you're asking for salvation from the woman you tried to destroy." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "I'll pray for you," she said softly, "but I won't lie for you." She stood up, walked past him, and for the first time in over a decade, she felt light. Not because she had lost 53 pounds, but because she had finally dropped the weight of his control. By the first week of June 2009, Hannah had dropped over 70 pounds. But more than that, she had stepped into a new version of herself, one built on intention, not fear. Her skin was clearer, her posture had changed. But most noticeably, she no longer apologized for taking up space. Brad had been suspended from work pending investigation. The silence in the house was thick, but different now. He avoided her, not because she yelled, but because she didn't. The power dynamic had shifted. He was sinking, and she was rising. One morning, she walked into the kitchen wearing a fitted black shirt she hadn't touched in years. She poured herself a smoothie and sat at the table, notebook open, pen in hand. Brad entered, looking like he hadn't slept. "You going somewhere?" he asked. Gym, she said. Then brunch with Carla and the girls. He shook his head. You spend more time with them than with your own husband. I'm not your wife anymore, Brad, she said, voice steady. I'm just a woman who used to be. He scoffed. You think you're better than me now? No, she said. Just not less. Later that day, while sipping coffee at the cafe on Hamilton Street, Carla leaned in and said, You ever think about starting a blog or something? You got a story, Hannah, and people need that. Hannah smiled, a little nervous. Who'd read that? I would, Carla replied. So would half the women in this town. It sparked something. By mid-June, Hannah launched a small online page called Weight of Truth. She shared one post a week, raw, honest, and real. She didn't pretend to be a guru. She just spoke from experience. One of her first posts read, I was 322 pounds of pain, silence, and survival. I lost 75 pounds of body weight, but I've shed far more in shame. Health is not a number. It's peace. It's living by your values, not someone else's approval. The post went local viral. Messages came in, women from nearby towns, some from church, some from her high school days, all thanking her for putting into words what they had buried deep. That kind of connection? That was real wealth, emotional richness, community, prosperity born from truth. Brad noticed the attention, of course. He came home one evening holding a bottle of cheap wine. I read your little post, he said. Whole town's gonna know our business now. It's my business, she replied. My story. You always make yourself the victim. No, Hannah said softly. You did that. I just stopped playing the role. He stared at her. The man who once stood tall in tailored suits now looked small in his own house. No job, no title, no one to blame but himself. I'm gonna fix this, he muttered, more to himself than to her. You do that, she said, walking past him. But don't expect me to shrink again so you can stand taller. That night, she posted a second entry titled, Losing Weight, Gaining Power. She wrote, The more I let go of the pounds, the more I see the lies I lived in. I thought I needed to be skinny to earn love. But real love doesn't come with conditions. It honors your journey. It respects your effort. It adds to your life, not strips you down to prove your worth. That post was shared over 200 times. For the first time, Hannah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not from her weight, from his grip. By the end of the month, she hit a milestone. 100 pounds lost. She stood in front of the mirror, touched her skin, her face, her heart. Not out of vanity, out of victory. This wasn't a diet, it was a resurrection. And the world was starting to notice. By the third week of July 2009, Allentown was heavy with heat. Summer rolled in thick and slow, pressing sweat onto skin and slowing down traffic along the familiar streets. But inside Hannah's world, everything was speeding up. She had now lost 110 pounds. Her body moved differently. Her energy was high. She was walking almost 5 miles a day, lifting light weights, eating with purpose, not punishment. Her face was leaner, but her eyes burned with fire, and people were watching. Her blog, Weight of Truth, was getting over 1,000 hits a week. She had been invited to speak at a small women's event in Bethlehem. A health coach from Philadelphia reached out, saying her story was real, raw, and needed. Even a podcast wanted to feature her, all from a woman who once sat alone, quietly swallowing her pain with food. One afternoon, while grabbing iced coffee from the cafe downtown, she ran into someone she hadn't seen in years. Wait, Hannah? Hannah Baxter? It was Melissa Green, her former high school classmate, the one who used to whisper behind her back about her size, her clothes, her lack of style. But today, Melissa looked stunned. "You look incredible," she said, eyes wide. "I almost didn't recognize you." Hannah smiled politely. "Thanks. It's been a journey." "What's your secret?" Melissa asked. "Surgery? Pills? New boyfriend?" Hannah laughed softly. "None of that. Just choosing health and truth. That was the real shift." Melissa blinked. "Wow. Well, good for you." That night, Hannah wrote in her journal, "Funny how the same people who once mocked you now praise you. But that's not the win. The real win is that I don't need their approval anymore. My prosperity comes from peace, not popularity." Meanwhile, back at home, Brad was unraveling fast. The HR investigation had turned into a formal review, whispers of embezzlement, misreported expenses, something about fake client reports. He was no longer suspended. He was fired, effective July 18th. That Friday, he came home with a cardboard box in his arms, files, a framed photo, his nameplate. He dropped the box on the floor and poured himself a drink. "I built that company," he muttered. "Gave them 15 years. "They gave you a paycheck," Hannah said. "Not cruel, just factual. You gave them lies." He looked at her, eyes hollow. "Don't act like you're better than me now." "I'm not acting," she said. "I just learned to live by my values. You gambled your career for image. I rebuilt my life for truth." "You think your blog and smoothies make you some kind of saint?" "No," she said, "but they helped me become someone I'm proud to be." For the first time, Brad looked genuinely afraid. Not of her words, but of what he had lost. Control, respect, his mask. That Sunday, at church, the pastor's sermon was about redemption, about how broken people cling to pride until it's too late to repair what they've shattered. Hannah didn't cry. She just sat there, calm, letting the words settle like a final page in a chapter she had long needed to close. Back at home, Brad sat in the dark, staring at nothing. "I need help," he said finally. Hannah walked over, calm and centered. "You need healing," she replied. "But that doesn't mean I have to be your medicine." He looked at her like he didn't recognize her anymore. Because he didn't. The woman standing in front of him wasn't the one he laughed at in December. She wasn't the woman who shrank to fit his life. She had become her own life. A life filled with purpose, with health, with real prosperity that no money could buy. A life built on values and truth and strength. By the end of July, Hannah stepped on the scale and saw the number, 192 pounds. She had lost 130 pounds exactly. She stood there in silence, hand over her heart, not crying, just breathing. That moment wasn't about the weight. It was about the weightlessness, of shame, of fear, of being less than. And she knew in her bones. The best part was still ahead. By the first Saturday of August 2009, Allentown was buzzing with summer fairs, kids chasing melting popsicles, and the sound of sprinklers clicking across neighborhood lawns. But for Hannah, this particular Saturday held something far bigger than a season. It marked her first time standing on a stage, not as someone's wife or someone's shame, but as a woman with something powerful to say. The local community center had invited her to speak at their annual wellness event. The hall wasn't huge, maybe 80 chairs lined up, mostly women, a few husbands, and some young girls sitting cross-legged up front. But to Hannah, it might as well have been Madison Square Garden. Carla stood beside her before she went up. "Don't think about the people, just speak your truth. You've already won." Hannah smiled, nerves flickering in her chest. But it wasn't fear. It was energy, a new kind of power. When her name was called, she stepped up to the mic in a simple fitted dress. She didn't hide her arms. She didn't tug at the fabric. She stood tall, 130 pounds lighter, but miles stronger. "Hi, I'm Hannah Baxter," she began. "I was born right here in Allentown. Most of you probably passed me in a grocery store once, or maybe at church. You might have never noticed me, but that's okay. I didn't really notice myself for a long time either." Soft chuckles, eyes leaning in. "For years, I let other people define my worth. My body was big, so I thought I had to be small in every other way. Quiet, easy, invisible. I was over 300 pounds, and I thought that number meant I wasn't allowed to ask for love, respect, or peace." The room fell still. "My husband. He didn't hit me. He didn't cheat. But he used his words like weapons. He made jokes about my weight in front of strangers. He controlled what I ate. He made me feel like I was lucky just to have him. And I believed it, until one night in December, when I sat at a dinner table and realized I wasn't just full of pain. I was starving for truth." Someone sniffled. "I started walking. 1 block, then 2. I lost pounds, yes. But more than that, I lost fear. I gained values, I found my voice. And I learned that real prosperity doesn't come from money. It comes from being able to look in the mirror and say, 'I like who I'm becoming.'" Applause broke the silence, rising like a wave. Hannah blinked back tears. Not sadness. Release. After the talk, people lined up just to hug her, to share their own stories. One woman whispered, "You saved me today." Back home that evening, the sun dipped low over the rooftops. Hannah sat outside on the porch with a cup of herbal tea, her notebook in her lap. She wrote, "Today I spoke to strangers and they saw me. Not my weight, not my past, not my pain. Just me. I don't want revenge anymore. I want redemption. But if it comes with a little justice, I'll take that too." Inside, Brad sat slouched on the couch, jobless, silent, lost. He hadn't come to the event, said he didn't do public stuff. But later that night, he opened her blog on his phone. He read post after post, read the comments, the shares, the lives she was touching, and something in him cracked. He stood in the hallway, watching her through the window. "You're really doing this," he said. She looked up. "Doing what?" "Becoming someone." "I always was someone," she replied. "You just couldn't see it through your own ego." He swallowed hard. "I messed up." She nodded. "You did?" "I lost everything." "No," she said gently. "You lost me. The rest was just stuff." He stepped closer, voice low. "Can we start over?" Hannah looked at him. Really looked. "You want me now because the world does. You want the woman who shines. But where were you when I was crawling out of the dark? When I was choosing salad over shame? When I was building this version of me from broken pieces?" He had no answer. Because the truth was, he didn't want her healed. He only wanted her small. "I don't hate you, Brad," she said, "but I love myself more." That night, as the stars lit up the sky above Allentown, Hannah went to bed alone, but not lonely. Because for the first time in her life, she didn't need anyone to complete her. She was already whole. By late August of 2009, Pennsylvania's skies softened with the golden tint of early fall. The air in Allentown carried a gentle crispness, a quiet kind of promise. Hannah had grown into her new life like a tree growing toward sunlight, slow, steady, and impossible to ignore. She was now 192 pounds, 130 pounds gone. But her real transformation had little to do with numbers. It was about presence, purpose, power. Her blog had gained traction beyond their town. A national women's lifestyle site reached out asking to republish her story. Her inbox filled with women from California, Texas, Georgia, some in their 50s, some just out of college. Each message echoed the same line. "You gave me the courage to try again. One Thursday morning, Hannah stood in front of the mirror, zipping up a fitted burgundy dress. It clung in the right places. She looked radiant, not because of the pounds lost, but because of what she had found. She was headed to an interview. A community radio station wanted to spotlight her journey. A local woman who turned pain into power. As she gathered her purse, Brad stood in the doorway. "You look good," he said, almost sheepish. She looked at him, disheveled, unemployed, still clinging to pride. "Thank you," she replied. "I feel good." He hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" She paused. "Do you really think I was that bad?" Hannah tilted her head, eyes calm but sharp. "I think you were small, and I shrunk myself to match you. But not anymore." He blinked, words caught in his throat. She continued, "You were so obsessed with money and image and status, you forgot about values, about respect. You traded real prosperity for control. And now, you're broke, not just in dollars, but in dignity." Brad looked away. "I don't wish you harm," she added, "but I'm done saving you from the messes you create." That afternoon, during the radio interview, the host asked her a question that made the room go quiet. "If you could go back to that dinner in December, the one where your husband humiliated you in front of everyone, what would you say to yourself in that moment?" Hannah took a breath. "I'd whisper, 'He doesn't define you. His shame is not your truth. One day you'll rise, not because you lost weight, but because you finally saw yourself as worthy of more.'" The host leaned forward. "And now?" "Now," Hannah said, smiling, "I don't chase revenge. I live my redemption. That's enough." The next day, she received a formal invitation to speak at a women's empowerment conference in Philadelphia that October. Keynote: expenses paid. When she opened the email, she sat still for a moment. Then she cried, not from sadness, but from the full weight of knowing how far she had come. Brad found out through mutual friends. He called her that night. "I heard about the conference," he said. "That's big." "It is," she replied. "You'll do great," he added quietly. "I mean that." "Thank you," he sighed. "I messed up, Hannah." "I know. I wish I'd been better." "So do I." He paused. "Do you think we'll ever—" "No," she cut in, soft but firm. "That version of me doesn't exist anymore, and I won't go back to meet her." There was silence. Then a quiet goodbye. And just like that, the door to that chapter finally closed. On October 3rd, Hannah stepped on stage in front of over 300 women. She stood behind the podium, heart steady, voice clear. "My name is Hannah Baxter," she began. "I used to be invisible. I used to let other people's opinions shape my worth. But today, I speak as a woman who reclaimed her voice, her health, her identity. I speak not as a victim, but as a survivor of silence, shame, and self-betrayal." The applause that followed was thunderous. She stood tall, tears in her eyes, not from pain, from peace. Because in the end, she didn't just lose 130 pounds, she gained herself. And no one could take that away.